Critique of Schopenhauer's Views on the Unconscious by John Vespasian. The 20th century brought strong criticism of the views on the unconscious presented by Arthur Schopenhauer, 1788 to 1860. I am referring specifically to the works of Carl Rogers, Wilhelm Reich, and William James. Their definitions of the unconscious are based on the ideas developed by Schopenhauer, but only after having narrowed them down to a point where they are almost unrecognizable. In their own ways, Carl Rogers, Wilhelm Reich, and William James emphasize particular aspects of Schopenhauer's concept of the unconscious. As a result, they have obscured the original concept and deprived it of its ability to explain human action. Let's first recapitulate what Schopenhauer put forward in his two major books about the fourfold root of the principle of sufficient reason, 1814, and 4 years later in The World as Will and Representation. According to Schopenhauer, the will, life force, drives all living creatures to ensure their survival and reproduction. Even if adopt countermeasures, you will not succeed in escaping the influence of the will. You can minimize its negative effects, but you cannot shut it down. Schopenhauer defined the will as a blind, irrational force. It is a definition that matches Sigmund Freud's conception of the unconscious. Although Schopenhauer had employed historical examples and Freud had referred to psychiatric cases, they are speaking about the same phenomenon. Freud's General Introduction to Psychoanalysis, 1917, is taking over the theory of the will created by Schopenhauer 100 years earlier, but without giving Schopenhauer proper credit. Schopenhauer compared to William James. In the United States of America, philosopher William James, 1842 to 1910, gave a deep turn to theory of the unconscious. It's worth mentioning that James had been a philosophy professor until 1889, when his position was rebaptized Professorship of Psychology. James defined the unconscious as a dynamic, ever-changing, and fluid process. He viewed it as a constant stream of thoughts under the surface of our perceptions, decisions, and actions. The conception of the unconscious put forward by James is depriving Schopenhauer's insights of their explanatory value. I fail to see any consistency in James' arguments. He threw away Schopenhauer's theory of the will to put in place an amorphous doctrine. Schopenhauer's views on the unconscious had supplied very solid arguments to understand human behavior, especially the short-sighted, impulsive actions that generate most problems in society. In contrast, the stream of consciousness advocated by James has only created confusion. In his Principles of Psychology, published in 1890, James theorized that the unconscious obeys primarily to subjective factors. He did not believe in influences from a universal energy or driver. By removing universal principles, James fell into subjective speculations. He called his philosophy pragmatism, because it is supposed to help individuals make decisions without a fixed frame of reference. Despite its name, pragmatism is profoundly impractical. It's based on wishful thinking alone. Do you really expect people to make good decisions without consistent principles? What is the point of analyzing a random stream of thoughts? While Schopenhauer had provided solid practical advice to readers, James pushed them towards chaos. His later books are only adding to the confusion. In The Will to Believe, 1907, and Pragmatism, 1907, James promotes subjectivity at the expense of facts, reason, and consistency. Schopenhauer compared to Carl Rogers. The humanistic psychology favored by Carl Rogers, 1902 to 1987, relies on the unconscious for personal growth and self-actualization, but is tinted by deep relativism and subjectivity. Rogers rejected the definitions of the unconscious created by Schopenhauer, the theory of the will, and Freud, the split of the mind in unconscious, preconscious, and conscious. Rogers regarded those definitions as too deterministic. According to Rogers, each individual is driven by the desire to improve himself and actualize his full potential. I won't deny that Roger had good intentions, but does his theory hold water? Can it really help people make beneficial decisions? Schopenhauer's theory of the will is supported by historical and current observations. It's obvious that the will, life force, plays a role in human motivation, and that it sometimes drives people to make disastrous choices. If you want to improve the quality of your decisions, it is in your interest to study Schopenhauer's advice. Conversely, I fail to see the benefit of studying Rogers' explanations on the self-concept and ideal self. Rogers' book Client-Centered Therapy, 1951, endorses deep subjectivity and gives no guidelines for improving one's life. I cannot share Rogers' optimism in believing that all individuals pursue personal growth and self-actualization. Why am I so skeptical? Because I have witnessed too many examples of passivity, apathy, or defeatism. I've serious doubts that subjectivity can prompt individuals to seize opportunities and make the best of their lives. One shouldn't be too quick in dismissing Schopenhauer as too pessimistic and endorsing Rogers because of his optimism. A feasible philosophy needs to be based on reality, not on nice feelings and wishful thinking. Schopenhauer compared to Wilhelm Reich. From all modern psychiatrists, Wilhelm Reich, 1897 to 1957, was, in his early work, the closest to Schopenhauer's concept of the unconscious. Unfortunately, as of 1940, Reich attempted to capture the life force, which he had rebaptized orgone, in a machine that failed to deliver the expected results. Reich was an early associate of Freud, but went his own way as of 1923. Reich regarded Freud's theories as decoupled from first-hand clinical observations, which gave more weight to the life force, survival, procreation, etc., as motivational driver. In his book, The Function of the Orgasm, 1927, Reich was indirectly endorsing Schopenhauer's theory of the will, even if Reich employed biological arguments instead of philosophical. Like Schopenhauer, Reich theorized that a life force drives the universe, living creatures, in particular, and that mental or physical illness arises when individuals attempt to oppose their unconscious. I find Reich's advice to readers interesting, but less practical than Schopenhauer's. For instance, I fail to see how readers can benefit from Reich's theory of the character armor, which is supposed to describe emotional or physical rigidities that arise from opposing the life force. Everybody can draw some benefit from studying the works of Carl Rogers, William James, and Wilhelm Reich. However, their direct or indirect critique of Schopenhauer's philosophy has still to demonstrate its value. If you are interested in putting rational ideas into practice in daily life, I recommend you my book titled Asymmetry, The Shortcut to Success When Success Seems Impossible. For more information, go to johnvespasian.com.